What's a cool fact about the human body that a lot of people don't know? Story one. The bone that supports your eyeball, called the orbital floor, is paper thin and has a large empty cavity called the maxillary sinus on the opposite side. When you get hit hard in the eyeball, instead of your eyeball itself rupturing, the bone underneath your eye breaks, which is called an orbital floor fracture. This releases the pressure from the impact and saves your eyeball. If you crush a beach ball against a concrete wall, you can pop it. But if you try to crush it against a styrofoam wall, the wall breaks, but the beach ball is fine. An amazing evolutionary adaptation to protect your eyesight. Story 2. Really late. But I discovered this thing during my thesis. We were researching patients with neurological problems and people who had brain injuries, and we found a woman in her 30s that had had part of her brain removed. More specifically, the area that activates when you move your body. Well, she was moving and talking with just some minor missteps, and theoretically it was not possible. She was paralyzed in the first 3 months after the operation. She was caught in a car accident, if I remember correctly. We were trying out a new scanner for the brain, and we found out that an area of the brain that wasn't supposed to work and control the movement was doing just that. The occipital area usually controls the vision, was now working as a motor control area. The brain is really amazing. Story 3. The dive reflex. When your face is submerged in chilled water and you hold your breath, it causes your heart rate to lower and blood supply to be increased to vital organs such as the heart and brain. This is useful to help increase the amount of time you can hold your breath, but is also useful in helping to manage PSVT, paroxysmal supraventricular tachycardia, which is characterized by occasional bouts of high heart rate. Story 4. Some people are born with extra ribs called cervical ribs, which grow from the C7 vertebrae in the neck. It's a weird and rare mutation that a lot of people don't even know they have, although it is also a cause of thoracic outlet syndrome, which is where pressure is applied to the nerves, veins, and arteries running into the arms. It can be really painful, and in some rare cases can cause gangrene in the arms. If left untreated, it can kill you if you're really unlucky. Source: I have the non-cervical rib-induced variety. Story 5. If we were an RPG character, our main stat would be endurance. We are, by animal standards, hellishly undying and unrelenting terrors. These Terminator-esque nightmares that just do not stop. So ancestrally, we are persistence hunters. That is, our main tactic for catching prey without fancy weapons was to just run them down, especially on our way back home to the African desert. You can still see it all over the human body. We are nearly hairless. This lack of insulation means better heat dissipation. We have a ton of sweat glands next to other mammals. Again, heat dissipation. Another one is our two-legged gait. Walking for us is technically just a series of controlled falls. We let gravity do half the work, and as a result, use up fewer resources and generate less heat. Quadrupeds, on the other hand, have to do more work with more legs. I mean, imagine being a more or less gazelle of 500,000 years ago. You're eating, doing your thing, when this predator arrives, so you run off. Now, most predators, they'll only chase for a short distance and then call it a day. Watch cats, for instance. But this one, here he is again. So you run, he returns, you run again, he returns, you're getting hot. You have to stop and pant to lose heat, but he just keeps jogging. You run. He keeps coming. You're tired, you're fast, but not for very long, and this stretches your limits. Eventually, you just lay there, exhausted and heat-stunned, and this ludicrous hairless monkey just jogs on over and kills you. That's our claws, our sharp teeth. Even without our technology and tool-making, we simply don't stop. Story 6. We have an internal regulator that prevents us from using our full strength. Our muscles usually only work at about 60% max of what we are capable of. In extreme life and death situations, these regulators stop, and we are able to use our full strength. This is how the parts where people tipped over cars and similar come from. These regulators are because at full strength we heavily damage our bodies. Essentially, you could lift something to the point where it is either lifted or your arm just breaks instead. I believe there has also been someone who ran so hard his leg broke. Story 7. Natural redheads require increased doses of anesthesia due to some connection with the mutated melanocortin 1 receptor. I'm a natural redhead myself and developed a fear of dentists because I'd always feel what they were doing. Eventually, I had an issue that couldn't be ignored and had to find a new dentist. At my first visit, he took one look at me and said, "You're a real redhead, huh?" "Yep." "Hygienist. Get me 4x the Novocaine." I knew I'd found my man, and he's been treating me ever since. Also shed my fears, since dental work is much less unpleasant when you're actually numb before they start. Story 8. The war that's constantly happening inside of you. Everyone knows about your immune system, but the sheer complexity of it is amazing. Like, your body has neutrophils, which are like the generic white blood cell that constantly goes around your blood vessels, seeking out foreign objects. But did you know there are cells called macrophages, which are like way better neutrophils in the fact that neutrophils mostly swallow bacteria to kill them? Macrophages do this too, except they can swallow close to 100. You have stuff like dendritic cells, whose main goal is to be an early warning system. They swallow an invader, then carry a piece of it back to T cells to activate them. Once they're activated, T cells swarm that specific invader and kill anything that has that antigen. I didn't even name close to all of the cells that are doing constant battle inside of you 24/7, 365 days a year. So next time you have the flu or an infection, think of the little guys inside you who gladly fight the good fight. Story 9. Most of our body never gets more than 20 years old. Our cells divide in a process called mitosis and then die. With the exception of your nervous system, the oldest organ in your body is the lungs in terms of age of your cells. Your skin never gets more than a few weeks old. Your mouth never gets more than a few days old. Essentially, the reason we age is not because the cells are old, but they lose their ability to perform functions as effectively as they go through the mostly genetically determined aging process. Your cells are only designed to divide a set number of times due to structures called telomeres. It's a little more complicated than this, but I'm not writing a textbook, nor am I qualified to do so. Story 10. Your body can, in a way, evolve during your life to fit your needs. Say you are a New York City cab driver with a normal brain. You start when you're young and are very dependent on a map or directions from the passengers. As you continue to do this for years, your brain adapts to handle its new job. Areas of your brain in charge of spatial awareness and memory of roads starts to grow, building a map in your brain. MRIs have shown a significant increase. It's not just your brain, though. There's a village somewhere in the Mediterranean, I believe, where they adapt to living in water. Their homes are built on stilts in the water, and they are strictly pescatarian by necessity. Their eyes developed thicker outer layers for seeing underwater for long durations, as well as a huge lung capacity. Humans are amazing. Story 11. Mitochondria started out as a symbiotic organism that infected cells. Basically, a cell swallowed a cell that was able to breathe with oxygen. I don't know the term in English, but it wasn't able to digest it, so they became BFF. The big cell gave food to the small cell, which used oxygen to produce more energy. Both of the cells were benefited, and the small cell eventually transformed into the mitochondria, and they became one organism. The same process happens with the chloroplasto, the organ that makes photosynthesis. Both of these processes are backed up by the fact that these organs have DNA of their own, as well as a double membrane. One of the organs and the other was wrapped around them while entering the bacteria. Story 12. The cornea is the only part of the body without blood flow. It gets oxygen directly from the air. Also, in an adult, 25% of your bones are in your feet. Humans are the only animals with a chin. You don't have kneecaps until you are 2 to 6 years old. The egg that you were created from existed before your mother was born. Straight hair comes out of the follicle, and curly hair comes out of an oval-shaped follicle. About 90% of the cells that make up humans are not human. We are mainly bacteria and fungi. Story 13. Some Asian people, Southeast like Japanese or Korean, do not emit body odor from their armpits and do not need deodorant. These same people do not have sticky earwax. How can you tell if you're a non-stinky armpit Asian? If you have gooey, sticky earwax, keep using deodorant. If your earwax is dry and crumbly, stop using deodorant for a week and have a trusted friend or partner give you a sniff test after moderate exercise, or at the end of the day. You probably are wasting money on deodorant. Story 14. The microscopic mites living on your face feeding off the oil glands. You can't see them, but they're there. They are microscopic mites, eight-legged creatures rather like spiders. Almost every human being has them. They spend their entire lives on our faces, where they eat, mate, and finally die. There are two species of mite that live on your face, Demodex follicularum and D. brevis. It's cool because that means I'll always have some friends with me. Story 15. More stuff about endurance and sugar levels. A doctor teacher once told me this as a part of a survival course. I don't remember much, so it'd be nice if someone knowledgeable could fill in the whole story. From what I remember, you have a couple of stages of endurance and stress. One, you run up the stairs because whatever. Your heart rate rises so that you get more oxygen and sugar in your body. Two, you realize your friend is dying and you have to run up the mountain for 5 kilometers. Another example is that there is a bear chasing you, and you climb up a tree and stay hanging there. Normally, after 10 minutes, you'd be exhausted because the first stress response, elevated heart rate, would wear off. But since there's grave danger, your kidneys start producing additional sugar from whatever you have saved, the fat in your body, and any available glucose that's just hanging in your body. Now you can last hours on that tree. 3. The bear is still there and it's been 3 hours. You're starting to feel fatigued, but now another system kicks in. Your kidneys start converting everything to glucose. Like everything that you don't need right in this moment is converted into sugar and then energy. 4. It's been 24 hours and that bear is gone now. You drop down incredibly exhausted. At this point, your body has no energy left whatsoever, and it should just drop and die slowly in sleep. But here comes the fourth stress response, your adrenal glands. Hope that's the correct name. In my language, we call them upper kidneys. These are above your kidneys, basically a part of them. And at this stage, they get bigger, and guess what they do? Glucose. They do anything possible and impossible to create glucose out of nothing. Plasma, bone marrow, fat, anything they can get their hands on. They even deprive less important organs to give you energy to avoid instant death, like your liver, I think, or anything that's not brain, lungs, heart, and kidneys. This can keep you going for weeks or even years, which happens to people who are constantly stressed. We call it the businessman disease, and don't sleep or eat enough. Obviously, this can cause massive health issues in the long run, but this is why and how it's possible to go without sleep and food for long periods, be it in life-threatening situations or in simple, everyday, stressful life. Again, this is all just from my memory, and I'm sure half of it is plain wrong. I'd really appreciate it if someone could take the time to correct it, but I guess it gives you at least a rough idea about stress and endurance. Story 16. Despite us being the most complicated species on the planet, in many ways, we don't have the largest genome, not by a long shot. Compared to our paltry 3 billion base pairs, species like Amoeba dubia that have 670 billion base pair genomes should logically be more complex, right? They should have way more genes after all. This is the C-value paradox. Genome size does not correlate with organism complexity. It is solved by the fact that humans have a much higher percentage of regulatory elements, DNA sequences, that regulate other parts of the genome instead of coding for proteins than any other organism. Just 1% of our DNA codes for proteins. The other 99% are these regulatory elements, creating unique patterns of activation among that 1%. This patterning has led to the extraordinary diversity of our organs and tissues, the incredible complexity of our brains, and our ability to survive the harsh environments of our world, despite being large, hot, and squishy. Story 17. When you first set your sight on the seconds of a watch, or anything with a rapid regular movement, you will sometimes feel like the first second lasts a little bit too long. It's because your brain replaces the motion blur that happens when you move your sight from wherever it was to the watch with a fixed image. And the cool thing is that it replaces it after the fact, or rather, gives you a very short false memory that you were already watching the watch while your eyes were moving, making that first second seem longer. It's called chronostasis. Story 18. You are actually quite hard to kill. Your body is able to fend off a lot of disease, repair damage it sustains, can sustain itself without external energy input by using energy stored in your body. It can even to a degree synthesize some of the vitamins. You are able to detect tiny changes in air currents with your skin, detect minute changes in ambient temperature, and react to it without you even knowing. Your ears can detect slight changes in speaking patterns and voice pitches, which can lead to you getting angry. Equal sign hundreds of thousands tiny detectors in your body and brain detecting certain substances. Kind of scary. If your stomach walls wouldn't have a special kind of skin, you'd digest yourself. There is something called the basal ganglia. It is like a block between your mind and the physical world, keeping unwanted thoughts or actions from being executed by the body. I know most of this is quite simplified, but I tried to make it as approachable as possible. Story 19. You can sometimes taste smells depending on how strong the odor is. For example, at a crime scene and there's high amounts of blood, you'd unfortunately taste it. Some of you may be like, "So I'm screwing me snake now?" No, that's different. What is actually happening is as the molecules circulate in the air, diffusion for those that do know, and you inhale with your nostrils, those same molecules goes into your nasal cannula, and before it goes into your lung, it then goes into your tongue, and that's what you taste. Another example is when you go into a cosmetic store and someone sprays perfume in your face as a way to pick a sale, and as you're choking, you resist the urge to punch them in their face, and as you're about to walk off there, a weird taste in your mouth. Not all of it gets into your mouth directly, you just inhale too much tithe to the point you can taste it. But the question of whether the perfume may kill you accidentally swallowed some. Not the best explanation, but I tried. Story 20. Your brain mostly kind of makes up your field of vision. Receptors on the retina can only register the color of the light in the very middle of the retina, the fovea. The fovea is also the only place on the retina where the density of the light receptors is high enough that you can register a clear, distinguished image. The rest is just kind of a blurry, black and white mess. Also, there are blood vessels that block the light reaching certain parts of the retina, and the round shape of your eye will make the edge of your field of vision seem closer than the middle. Oh, and because of the lens, the image is displayed upside down. What you actually register is a blurry, upside down black and white image with vine like black lines running through it, caused by the blood vessels. And only the middle part makes a small amount of sense. Your brain just makes the rest of it up. Story 21. Breast milk will produce antibodies to help babies fight off disease. It's thought that the baby's saliva enters the nipple. Mom's body tests for any undesirable bacteria, then produces milk to help fight it off. For this reason, it's not unusual for breast milk to look different when the baby is sick. Sometimes very dark yellow and thick, almost like colostrum. It also contains different hormones, depending on the time of day, and is antibacterial. It is a living liquid. Story 22. This is going to get lost, but if you have a significant injury near or on one of your hands that your body is able to heal, your fingernails on the hurt hand will grow faster than on the undamaged one because your body is sending more resources and energy to that part of you. I imagine a similar thing would happen with feet as well. Source. I broke my arm last year and after having it explained by the nurse, started measuring my fingernails against each other. The left ones on my broken arm definitely grew faster than the right. Not by a whole lot, but the difference was visible. Story 23. Humans are the only type of animals that are able to or will ignore our instincts. If an antelope in the wild hears the slightest rustle or crack, it will bolt away. But if a person is about to walk into an elevator and they see a person in there that their instinct warns them about, it's most likely that the person will still go in. After being attacked, countless victims said that they got a bad feeling about the attacker, but they all said that they ignored it. If humans did listen to their instincts more, then there would be less people in prisons and less attacks. Story 24. Neuropathic pain can be endlessly bad and almost totally unresponsive to any painkillers but IME, dissociative and sedative drugs. There's no time limit to it either. Because it's nerve pain without a physical cause, it can't and won't be treated, and your brain will continue to send "we are in agony" signals to your entire body anyway. Again, because it's neuropathic, there's no limit to the level of pain it will make you think you're in, and your body doesn't pass out to cope or any of the other vaguely reassuring things you delude yourself into believing about extreme pain before experiencing it. It can feel from anything such as a mild but pervasive itch to a burning fire throughout your entire body. Similar to cluster migraines, it has a high mortality rate due to patients taking their own lives to escape the pain. I'm not aware of any way yet we know to predict, prevent, or treat them. Story 25. Some people know how to do this, but most don't. If you flick your tongue on the roof of your mouth, gather enough saliva and poke your jaw out, you can shoot saliva out of your mouth. For those who do this when yawning or flicking your tongue on accident, there is a name for it. It's called gleeking. You can learn to do it on command. Have fun with that. Also, just to screw with those who aren't self-aware, if you pay attention, you'll notice that your tongue always rests on the roof of your mouth. Don't believe me? Try keeping your tongue on the bottom of your mouth and tell me how uncomfortable it is. Go ahead. Story 26. I work in an ER and a guy came in because he had nonstop hiccups for 6 days. Every 45 seconds or so, he would hiccup. He was going insane because he couldn't sleep or focus and had a hard time eating. After running tons of tests and almost giving up hope on helping this guy, one of the nurses looked in his ears and found Q-tip cotton stuck inside. And as soon as the cotton was removed, the hiccups stopped completely. Dude was so relieved he cried. Story 27. Our antipathy to the rotten egg smell of sulfur is actually our brains recognizing the malodorous pathogen hydrogen sulfide, which is released during decomposition of our bodies. It's been postulated we've retained the atavistic fear of the stench from the days of contagious diseases like tuberculosis. The disease persisted inside corpses days after death. It's difficult to suppress the impulse to embrace a loved one who's died and we discovered their bodies, but our brains will invoke our aversion to sulfur in hope to deter you. It's less prevalent in today's world, with the innovations in medicine and the disposal of decomposing cadavers is meticulously planned. Story 28. When you hold your breath for a long time, it's not the lack of oxygen, but rather the feeling of too much carbon dioxide. Fun fact, it's the high amounts of carbon dioxide that help us keep breathing. When a person passes out and is given a mouth-to-mouth, it's not that you're pumping oxygen into his body. The air that is blown into the person's mouth has gone through the first person's lungs, meaning that it's poor in oxygen and rich in carbon dioxide. When the air is blown into the unconscious person's mouth, it goes through their lungs, and the carbon dioxide raises the pH levels in the person's blood. The high pH level is making the brain send the muscles in order to breathe again. Story 29. I think this might be a well-known fact, but I'm going to say it anyway. Liver is an organ that can regenerate by itself, meaning if you donate a part of it, that missing part will grow again after some time. Also, when the stomach is removed for some reason and the duodenum is attached to the esophagus during surgery, the newly created tube can get extended with time and create a new stomach, although it's a smaller one. On the other hand, if a patient is unfortunate and gets his spleen scratched by accident during surgery, the spleen is automatically removed from the body. Story 30. Future heart transplant patient here. I'm going to be put on the list in 3 weeks. During the evaluation process, I learned one really odd thing. Your body doesn't just attack viruses and bacteria, it attacks all foreign tissue. This means foreign hearts, too. When heart transplants, or likely any transplant, go underway, they pump you full of immunosuppressants, so your body doesn't literally eat its own heart out. Afterwards, you have to take smaller amounts of immunosuppressants for the rest of your life.